Hi, I'm Teresa Norton, and welcome to The View from Abroad, a weekly podcast that takes a look back at one of the, mostly humorous columns I wrote for a Hong Kong newspaper from 1993 until 2000 on married life and political correctness and flirting and aging and national identity and parenting and the importance of keeping a secret and the catharsis of facing the truth. So each week I interview a guest to discuss how and if our opinions or our beliefs or our point of view have changed, or maybe they haven't over time. We're living in a very different world now, and it's kind of interesting to unpack why. So this week my guest is John Langford, who was born in New Orleans and grew up in Hong Kong. He went to university in the U.S., and then he returned to Hong Kong at about the same time that I arrived in Hong Kong, which was in the early 80s. John worked as an offshore oil rig roustabout, a radio DJ, a television news reporter, a pizza delivery guy, and a funeral home attendant. But he now has a commercial photography studio that's very successful, and we're going to get a chance to talk to him shortly. But before we get to John and get him in the studio with us, we're going to kick off with the newspaper column that I sent to him last week, which was published in the South China Morning Post on May 16th, 1996.
Battle of the Vexes. I don't know. Maybe I'm nuts. Why else would I be so determined to duel over a $33 white cotton dress or a parking space in Stanley in Hong Kong or a ballet lesson when there are so many more important things to battle over? Let's start with the white cotton dress. Tried it on, loved it, put it on the counter. Tried on another black and white Jackie Kennedy number. Ooh, think I love it. But the thing is, it's got kick pleats in the back, which have been cross-stitched shut. So the result is a distinctly un-Jackie balloon butt bustle effect. I asked the shop clerk to snip the stitches so I can see how it looks. No. They're meant to be taken out, right? Yes, after you buy it. But how can I tell if it fits? Blah, 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 blah. I dig my heels in. She digs her heels in. I thought I'll teach her. I won't buy the incredibly reasonably priced white cotton dress that I really want. Take that! I flounced out of the shop. Who won? On the parking spot. I am in Stanley on a Saturday afternoon. I know, I am nuts. And I'm cruising up and down in search of an empty parking meter when a couple walking back towards their car indicates they are leaving. I pull up in front of where they are parked and signal that I'll be backing in. They pull out, and a van tries to pull into my space. He dug his front fender in. I dug my back fender in. With a deftness of speed and accuracy that surprised the hell out of me, I backed into the space and perfectly parallel parked that car. Yes, I was pumped. I was psyched. Nobody was going to squeeze their way into my rightful spot. The van driver moved right up next to my car and stared me down. I sneered and dug through my handbag for a $2 coin for the meter. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the coin. Who won? Finally, we take a look at the ride to the ballet lesson. Grace is one of those kids who is happy 98% of the time. We were having a 2% morning. It started with something like, "Grace, it's time to go. You can finish the picture later." No, I said we have to leave now. Don't start the day like this, Grace. Let's go. Put the crayon down. I could see the lava starting to bubble under the surface of my little Mount Pinatubo. She doesn't erupt often, but when she does. She dug her heels in. I dug my heels in. She didn't want to go to ballet. I find myself actually saying to this child, "Fine, but I will tell you what, little girl, we skipped this lesson and you never take another ballet class in your entire life." Where the hell did that come from? You'll never take another ballet lesson in your entire life? Like you could be 24 years old and you won't be trying on any toe shoes, kid, because I said to put down that crayon and you wanted to finish coloring my hair in one of a series of about 1,000 pictures of Mommy. Mommy is always smiling in these pictures, by the way. Who won? 3 words. Choose your battles. I must remember these words because with victory comes battle fatigue, and that is what puts the furrow in your brow and takes the spring out of your step. Mind you, unconditional surrender can take a toll on the soul, too. I received a card the other day that put things into perspective for me. A couple we knew in another time and place had had difficulty starting their family. I would send the annual Christmas card, but stopped hearing back from them. A few years later, I learned that late in their second pregnancy, their firstborn son had died of a congenital birth defect. I sent a letter of condolence and continued to send the annual greeting, but heard nothing more from them for years. Until this week. A simple card arrived, thanking us for sticking by them all those years, for digging in our heels. Enclosed was a photo. They were smiling and holding their 2-year-old daughter. Choose your battles. Kick pleats, ballet classes, and car parks are the stuff you surrender. Friends and family are what's worth fighting for.
John Langford, welcome to The View from Abroad.
Teresa, thank you so much for having me. It's just wonderful to reconnect with you after all these years. And I am just delighted and honored that you would have me on your podcast. Thank you.
Well, I sent that column to you last week, and when I read it over, the point I was trying to make was that, digging my heels in was kind of tripping me up. And I would love to be able to say that I, sort of 30 years later, no longer do that. But I do, and it still does. What does my son call it? The incredible rightness of being. Like, I need to be right. And if I need to be right, maybe nobody's going to be happy. But I'm interested to hear, when you read that column, of what sort of things came up for you.
Well, let me begin by saying I am right there with you, sister. If I had a list of all of the times that I have camped out on my position and then, and been willing to die on that hill, and then looked back later, sometimes, later that day, later that week, or years later, I can still feel my face getting red all the way up into my hair follicles. So I can completely understand, and I can give you some examples of that. But like you, I wish that I had evolved to the point where I could say that's no longer an issue for me. But I'd be lying.
Right. Well, John, I've recently moved to Portugal, and I've had the most amazing experience here. Just wonderful. A big part of what makes a place a wonderful place for me is the people, and I've had extraordinary exchanges and wonderful experiences. However, I was on a train heading back from a little break that I'd taken, and the guy came to check my ticket. And he spoke to me in Portuguese, and I said to him, eu não falo português. I don't speak any Portuguese. And then he got very frustrated and kept talking to me in Portuguese. And then he said, give me your passport. And I said, oh, I don't have a passport. And I showed him my identity card. And he said to me, that is like a green card. And if I was in the U.S., I'd have to speak English. You need to learn to speak Portuguese. And I said, okay, thank you. And of course, I sat there with my, hamster wheel head going, I'm a customer. He shouldn't call me out for that. And maybe I need to have a word about the customer service. And then I stopped and I thought to myself, who wins if I make a big stink out of this? Is this going to change this guy's whole attitude? No. And also, I don't know what happened to him before he walked into my carriage in the train. We don't know what's happened to people before they behave the way they behave. I hope people cut me some slack from time to time when I'm not on my best behavior. So do you have, you said you had some examples. I'd love to hear one.
Well, to your point about, the hamster wheel, I have that same hamster wheel, by the way. And it, it often results in a scenario or a story or an explanation in my head that the other person is being, lazy or thoughtless or bound up in the chains of bureaucracy. And if they could just see the logic of the situation or my logic of the situation, then, we could be done with all of this. But unfortunately, that's not the way life works. And so when I'm being conscious and being my best self is when I can, if nothing else, come up with a story that helps me. I'll make up a story that, they had a fight that morning with their husband or wife or significant other. Their pet just died. They're in financial difficulty. Something that enables me to muster some compassion.
Right.
My phrase that I use, yours was the incredible lightness of being right.
The incredible rightness of being.
Yeah, being.
I have to credit my son Sam with that one.
Yeah. Well, mine is my white hot sword of righteous indignation. Picture Mel Gibson in the movie. What was it called?
Braveheart.
That. Yeah. And I picture my face, painted blue, and you can hear the sound of my sword coming out of my swing. And one example I can think of was I was returning 9 50-pound bags of mulch to my local garden supply place. So, my math's not the greatest, but I think that adds up to 450 pounds. And so I drove.
That's a lot of mulch.
Yeah, so I drove to the garden section where the pallets of mulch were, thinking that I was being considerate to the employees because I could just hoist those bags out of the back of my vehicle and throw them back on the pallet, done and dusted, like a dog's dinner, as the Australians would say. And so I marched the half mile to the customer service desk, which is at the other end of this massive store that, curves over the horizon. And when I explained my situation, the young lady said, well, you'll need to bring those bags of mulch up here. And I said, listen, I promise you, if I were going to try to scam Lowe's hardware, it would be for a lot more than $27 and would require much less effort. So if you'll just go ahead and give me the refund, then we can march down there with one of the employees and he can confirm that, in fact, I have returned 9 bags of mulch and I can be on my merry way. Nope, not going to happen. And we went back and forth. And now here comes my white hot sword and I'm getting out the blue paint. And I said, could I speak to the manager on duty? Can I speak to the manager? And anyway, here he comes. And I'm thinking, surely this guy will just be able to, wave his wand and make this happen. So I repeat the whole story and nope, he is not going to back down. So he and I march all the way down there together. He verifies that there are 9 bags, and then we come back, I get my refund, and then I walk all the way back to my car. So anyway, so exasperating. And I mean, still, I think I was right, but it wasn't helping me in that situation.
Right.
And you said it much more eloquently, but being right oftentimes doesn't serve one, or being camped out on being right.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've all heard the saying, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Right.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one of the things, an acronym that helped me a lot. I don't know if you've heard this one, Q-tip. as in the cotton swab, that American brand for ear cleaner things.
No, I haven't.
Quit taking it personally. And if I can remember that it's not everything is all about me, and that maybe the person had something happen before they hit my tarmac and, skidded to a screeching halt with me going, So yeah. Look, I think what we should do now is take a little commercial break. And seeing as I don't have any commercials yet, I'm going to let you be the commercial. And then after that, I want to talk to you about what true story of your own came out as a result of reading that column, because I'm interested to hear that. So, commercial break. So, John, I need you to tell me now let me make sure I get this right, because this is not a title that flows trippingly off the tongue. I want to know what the Rompin' Stompin' Circus of Love Extended World Tour Tales from 3 Years on the Road book is about. In 2 minutes or less, please.
I think you said that quite fluently.
Did I?
Yeah.
Did it trippingly off my tongue?
Yeah, the Rompin' Stompin' Circus of Love Extended World Tour Tales from 3 Years on the Road. You said it perfectly.
That's great. Well, we've now taken up 30 minutes of your commercial time on the title. I think we better get to the story.
So, a number of years ago, I had a birthday that ended in a 0, 50 to be exact. And there was a convergence of several factors. That significant birthday, half a century. The fact that my house had appreciated quite a bit in value, and so it was a good time to sell it. And then the fact that I'd been at my career as a self-employed photographer for about 25 years at that point, and was just ready for a break from doing photography for other people and returning to the reason that I got into photography to begin with, self-expression and doing it for myself. So I sold everything I owned. I used the proceeds from the sale of my house, my car, my furniture. I left nothing in storage, and I embarked on a 3-year around the world solo odyssey. And I went to 38 countries on 6 continents. And when I returned to the States, I documented that trip in that book.
At the front door. That sounds amazing.
It
Did
was
you go by
amazing.
yourself, or did you go with other people?
No, I went by myself, and as you would expect, you meet people along the way. I'm a friendly guy, and so there were short periods of travel with others, but for most of it, I was by myself.
Wow. Any lessons that you took away from that?
The main lesson is that we're all a lot more alike than we are different.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? That's great. Are there pictures in this book? I would assume so.
I'm glad you asked. There is another book which contains 50 of my favorite images from that trip. And that book is entitled 1,000 Days, which is
3 years is about that, right?
Exactly.
The end of commercial music. Okay, John, I'm interested in hearing from you is when you read that column, was there anything, there's an improv game that I kind of did a variation on called Magic Key, and where you listen to somebody tell a story and then you pick one word of that story that unlocks a true story of your own. So can you share something with me and tell me what the key was?
Absolutely. There were a couple of things that I keyed in on. One of them was the randomness of those events that you described in your column. They were the kinds of things that you can't see coming. You used the phrase earlier, skidding onto my tarmac, or words to that effect. I'm definitely going to add that to my repertoire. But those situations that you described with your daughter not wanting to put down the crayon, with you wanting to buy the dress, and
The parking space.
the parkings. Oh boy, can I relate to that. So those were all random incidents that showed up just completely unexpectedly. One of my mantras is to embrace randomness, but it's a lot easier to do that when it shows up in a way that's a lot more appealing. An example being when I was in Fiji, I happened to be sitting at breakfast one morning. The only other person at the table was a British guy who was in Fiji doing underwater conservation, it turned out. And he asked me what I was up to. I told him that I was a photographer traveling around the world. And he said, "Well, I don't suppose you have an underwater camera, do you?" And I said, "Well, funny you should ask. I do." And he said, "Well, how would you like to come with me for 3 weeks to a private island and scuba dive every day to your heart's content and document the work that we're doing?" Well, that's the kind of randomness that I can totally get on board with.
Right.
This fellow's name was Howard, and my response was, "Our Father who art in heaven, Howard be the..." The long and short of it was, when do we leave?
Yeah.
And so, we did, and it was, an amazing, remarkable, exciting adventure.
Tell me about the island. What was that like?
Well, I stayed literally in a grass hut on the beach, no windows, no air conditioning, just the sea breeze blowing in, staggeringly beautiful sunrises. And, I was fed and housed, and we dived, and I took thousands of photographs of the work they were doing.
And Howard didn't try to poison you or anything midway through the whole thing?
No, and I took a calculated risk. Obviously, I mean, once I was on the island, there was no way off. So I'm
Did
really.
You get a feeling at any point where you thought, "What if this guy's nuts"?
No, I place a lot of stock in my ability to read people,
Right.
and I got nothing but good vibes from this guy. And as it turned out, my assessment was correct. And there have been plenty of situations on that trip and in my life in general where, somebody offered me something that sounded appealing, but my spider sense told me no.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's so important to listen to those intuitive messages, I think. And I don't mean to divert the conversation too much, but I think that women sometimes, maybe I should just say not women, maybe I should just say me, sometimes in an effort to not embarrass the other person, or because I don't want them to be uncomfortable, I might kind of give them more of a benefit of the doubt than I ought to. And I don't know if that's kind of a female nurturant something or other, or if it's just me. But yeah, I mean, that's the first thing that came up when you said that you went with this guy for 3 weeks. I thought, wow, was there ever a moment that you thought, holy crap, what have I done? But you had good sense about that. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was never, after my initial assessment of Howard, that was never on my radar screen. Now, had I been mistaken, it would have been a long swim from that island.
No fooling.
So sorry, I interrupted you. Were you going to interject?
No, that was it. That was it. No.
So my point in saying all of that was that those instances when randomness shows up on our screen in ways that have there's a big possible upside to saying yes, and that's the other part of what I triggered on your column, is that at the end of it, or even in the midst of those situations, the light bulb did come on for you, and you said yes to, whatever instinct, whatever was your better instinct.
Right.
Even though you did go partway down the path.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you're saying about this randomness and saying yes. I had the privilege of working with sort of the guru and perhaps one of the big granddaddies of improv, Keith Johnstone. I was in a workshop of his at the Banff Center in Canada, and then I did a longer session with him in London. And, the sort of overriding message in improv is yes, and you say yes to what's offered and you add something to move the story along. And Keith had a wonderful saying, which I will share with you. People who say yes are rewarded by the adventures that they have. And people who say no are rewarded by the safety they maintain. And what I like about that is it's not saying always say yes or never say yes. It's saying, it's a balance in life. And if you're always saying no, you're missing out on the adventure. And if you're always saying yes, you may have to swim back a long way from that island at some point.
Well, I love that that summation of yes versus no. Back to your point about being a woman, and that there might be a greater disincentive to saying no, or saying yes for that matter.
Right.
I think you do have a point, but for women in the listening audience, and of course I'll never be a woman, but I met plenty of women on my travels, women in their 70s, women as young as 18, women who had traveled on their own, and I would encourage any women listening to not let that stand in your way of saying yes. But I think, having a finely tuned sense of intuition will serve you well, regardless of whether you're male or female or anything in between.
Well, listen, I had a lot of friends. In fact, my kids and my big brother are really happy to see how happy I am having made this move at 68, having lived someplace for 40 years on my own. And this move to Portugal has been wonderful. But I didn't think of it as being particularly brave or courageous. It's certainly not, 3 years on the road by myself with a billion different countries to go to. But I appreciate that for some people and for some of us as we get older, the idea of changing everything seems monumental. Then I've got to make new friends, and then I've got to find a new place to do this and that. But for me, I'll tell you what, there's this one guy said something really lovely to me. He didn't realize that he was saying something that was going to feel so lovely. But we were on a bus, and he knew I was leaving Hong Kong, and he said to me, yeah, well, my wife and I are probably going to be leaving. We're going to go back to LA. That's where we're from. And he said, I got to tell you, I envy you this trip, this next trip you're taking. He said, I kind of feel like I've got one more adventure left in me. And I thought to myself, thank you for that. Because something that it was a lot of work getting ready to move after all that time. But this notion of like another adventure left in you. Listen, we're getting to the end of our time here. I'm so glad we had this time together. Who sang that?
That was Carol Burnett. And then she tugged on her ear to say hello to her grandmother.
You are right. There you go. We have so much in common, and we haven't seen each other in 35 years. I'm so glad that you reached out to me on Facebook, and I was reading your posts, and I just thought, God, these sound a lot like my columns. I got to talk to John Langford, and I'm so glad I did.
Can I say one more thing real quickly?
Sure, of course you can.
Well, I think that people who are self-employed, that it describes you and I both, probably have a higher tolerance for risk than the general population.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably you and I in particular have a high tolerance for risk. And I feel like I've got one more move left in me. And so I am preparing to sell everything I own and by the end of the year, move to Indonesia.
Well, what do you know? We'll have to have a follow-up podcast when you're settled there, so we hear who you met along the way. Be sure to bring your underwater camera with you.
Will
That's
do.
my advice.
Teresa, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's lovely to catch up and reconnect, and all best wishes.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We're going to see you next time. Breathe all the time and come up slowly.